Welcome to the Meria Heller Show, on the net since 2000 and still going strong. If you feel like you're not getting the real news, if you feel like you're not connected spiritually, you have found your home. Meria covers a wide range of topics as only a snarky New Yorker can. Straight up, no chaser. No censorship, no corporate sponsors, thus true freedom of speech. Your subscription gives you unlimited access as a member of the smartest audience on earth. Relax and enjoy the education. Now here's Meria.
Good morning, world. Meria here, alive and kicking. Welcome to Tragedy and Hope with my excellent friend and co-host, Richard Grove, the one and only. Good morning, Richard.
Good morning, Maria. How you doing today?
I'm doing okay. I was thinking about all those years ago when I met you, since you and I talked before the show, and I was saying how long Dave McGowan was a co-host on my show. And I said, well, you're at about 12 or 13 years now.
Yeah, it's been a long time, since 2006. I think it's coming up 13 years anniversary would be Memorial Day this year.
Right. I was like, wow, all these years, time flies when you're having fun. But one thing that I was remembering after we hung up this morning was when I first met you, physically met you in Chicago. And, at that point, I knew you were one of the smartest young men I would ever meet in my life. And all these years later, looking at how your body of work has developed and how you've developed, the man you've become, not that you weren't a man then, I'm not surprised by it, okay? I'm awed. I'm actually awed by it because I didn't think you could get any smarter or better at what you do when I first met you, and then here you are.
Yeah, I mean, if I look at my work from 13 years ago, sometimes it makes me cringe a little bit. I'm like, oh, I was, a little rough and unpolished and a little bit nescient, a little bit ignorant, and a lot naive. And it's been a very rewarding journey, but it's all been off the beaten path. And I say sometimes, sometimes you get on that road off the beaten path, because you got beaten off the path, the super highway that they offer you, right? So it's only through making some untraditional decisions and kind of taking some calculated risks that turned out to be not so good calculations, because you need all the variables to calculate those risks. It's been a great adventure. It's been very rewarding, and a lot more memorable people I've met in the past 13 years than in the 13 years prior to that.
All right.
So,
do you ever think, though, to yourself, how different would my life be if I didn't wake up?
Well, it's hard to go through your entire life with as obvious as they make things now and not wake up to there's something a little bit different going on, and the territory is not reflective of the map we've been given. So if you're paying attention at all, I think you are starting to gather the critical mass to wake up, but eventually there'll be a point and things will click, and you'll, finally catch a contradiction that a politician says, or you'll catch something else that doesn't make sense in some official story or research or new finding, or you'll get, something that gets your brain going. And that's the invitation to learning that I think a lot of people's brains have been waiting for. Mm-hmm. So that's why when someone has their quote unquote wake up moment through whatever subject matter, they feel younger. They feel they have more vitality because their brain is doing the thing that it's created to do. Learning is fun, but if we go through a system that teaches us to think we know everything about everything, we don't ask questions anymore, and we just assume we have answers, then that leads to a lot of unrealized dreams and unsatisfactory living if you ask the people who live that type of lifestyle.
Exactly. Well, listen, I've always been that kind of kid who liked to learn, and I still like to learn. I mean, to me, you even the day you die, you didn't learn everything you came here to learn, okay? And I have always wanted to know everything about everything. So it's hard for me to understand people who choose to stay willfully ignorant. And just a simple example. One of my friends asked me to ask my naturopath, about whether the therapy I went through was available in Colorado Springs. Now, the truth of the matter is, all she had to do was go to Google, and she would have picked up, there's a million naturopaths doing prolotherapy in Colorado Springs. But people still don't want to get that it's up to them to do their own homework, but they still want everyone else to do it. And I think that's how people fall into these paradigms, whether it's political, religious division, whichever, just because they want someone else to tell them what to do.
And that's a recent occurrence. It's a recent occurrence. It hasn't always been like that. It hasn't always been like that in this country, as an example. So what you're observing, that's the symptom. And then if we had to put a name on the symptom, you could call that provisional self-esteem and or learned helplessness. There's two factors there. There's the part where they're not going to get self-esteem unless they're like doing something they're told, because that's how they get their self-esteem, by obeying orders, and that leads back to the learned helplessness. You don't know how to learn anything on your own because you're waiting for someone to tell you how to do or what to do, right? Instead of learning, oh, I need to become informed on this subject. How do I do that? Oh, I have a method I call upon. I do this, this, and this. And then I don't have to go over there and be ignorant or nescient and take actions without knowing what's going on. So in that circumstance, it just is something as simple as finding a naturopathic physician, which is, so to define that for the audience, an allopathic physician goes through the traditional medical school and would treat you in a hospital. A naturopathic physician goes through a medical school, but instead of treating you with pharmaceutical drugs, he or she is going to prescribe usually nutrients, foods, maybe exercise, things that actually are going to help your body, because the allopathic medicinal practitioners are not schooled about nutrition and health overall. They're more of addressing symptoms with pre-packaged products made by pharmaceutical companies, right? So there's like two different markets there. So if you're looking for the allopathic market, just go to a hospital. If you are into having a health and nutrition-based treatment system to be proactive, or to stimulate growth and healing from food, then you got to learn how to do some things yourself, because you're already off the beaten path. The beaten path is you don't need to know anything. Go to a hospital and somebody in a white lab coat will tell you everything you need to know.
Exactly.
Maybe.
Well, it's another way of giving your power away.
Yeah, I mean, for people to expect they can be healthy in today's world without learning to think for themselves how to identify what food is and what food isn't. I mean, for example, my wife Lisa went to the grocery store, a different grocery store yesterday, because she was someplace else in town. So she stopped at this place they call Trader Joe's. And I know Trader Joe's because when I lived in Virginia 20 years ago, Trader Joe's just was opening stores down there. Now it's finally come to Connecticut. She went there. She came home. She said, there are no GMOs in the store. There aren't, you don't have to look what's GMO and what's not GMO. They just don't even put it in the store.
I love it.
I thought was a really cool marketing idea, because if you want real food, that's what it would look like, right? So,
I got to tell you, we don't have a Trader Joe's in my town, but every time I go down the hill, as they call it, to the valley, I hit Trader Joe's all the time. I begged the people running my town to put a Trader Joe's in this town. But it's a closed off fascistic little town, so it's never going to happen. But yeah, that's part of being responsible, besides the fact that they're less expensive than other grocery stores, and you know what you're buying, and they've got a great assortment of organic food. So there's a free plug for Trader Joe's.
I was just going to say, I haven't set foot in one since like the last century, but now I'm going to probably have to go there, because when I do go to the grocery store, it's probably worth the extra, 5 minutes? It's only 5 or 7 minutes further than the other one.
Well, in an act of...
A total of 14 more minutes. I could probably save that. If I calculated the time in the other grocery store, I have to avoid, where's the GMO food, where's the non-GMO food, right? That probably adds up to the extra minutes I travel,
Well, in an act of defiance and protest, just another little small thing that I do, like putting a postage stamp upside down on my mail when I send my bills to show we're in distress. I buy the reusable bags that say Trader Joe's all over them, and I take that into my Safeway every time I go shopping. So, there are ways of, making little silent protest. and
Yeah.
feeling good about yourself.
Yeah, well, I don't think it's necessary to, because there are a lot of people that go out and do non-silent protests, and I don't always see those as being the most efficacious way to take action, right? Because action usually starts, those types of actions are going on because communication skills between individuals are absent. So therefore, they have to argue in large groups against each other, and you see how that always ends up like in civil war.
Exactly, and that's
That's a
why I
divide
don't.
and conquer.
That's why I don't.
So it gets
I don't
back
go.
to people who would have seemingly opposing positions, right? Right now, politics is super polarizing. But most of the people who are arguing about politics, guess what? They have a lot in common. And if they took a few minutes to just figure out what they had in common before they had to talk about politics, it's like there are people who want guns, there are people who don't want guns. Guess what they all want? They all want their families to be safe. They all want their families not to be, plundered, pillaged, raped in situations where people do that to people without any defenses, right? So if there was some way that made personal protection much safer and less lethal or something like that, then fine. But until then, you have to recognize that people all have the right to protect themselves, and some people want to do it different ways. Some people, if you grew up in a city, you're used to having the police protect you, if you think that's how that works, right?
Right.
But if you grew up in a rural setting, you used to, if you're in the woods and there's a wild animal that's threatening your life, you're not waiting for the police to come save you. You probably go out there prepared to deal with wild animals that want to take your life, right? So there's various situations, and people are all too ready to just engage with the polarization because it's like Schadenfreude. It's this German word that means taking pride and pleasure in other people's downfall, right? So there's a lot of that today, and I just have to ask, like in the like if that were absent, what would people be doing with their time, right? Could people be figuring out and catching up? It's like there's a lot of things going on in the world. Several people might be at the point where like all these politicians, I don't even understand how they get in office, and they say maybe I want to run for local whatever, and start having a say in the world that might be more tangible in their local area. Because you can't do anything about the circus sideshow thing that's shown on all the TVs. It's really not our game. We're not connected to it. Our votes don't bring those people into the picture. Those people are brought into the picture, and they say the votes match up, right? So there's a whole bunch of things, and I think it comes from learning what we can influence and control, and then learning what we can't. It's like there's a lot of things in the world I can't control. Guess what? I'm not going to give my time, energy, attention, and focus to those things.
Right.
Right? It's not that it's not tempting to get online and say all sorts of things and be like, ha ha, other side, you're wrong. Like, I'm sure those thoughts occur to me. I just don't fuel them. I don't give them energy. I don't give them attention. I don't give them time. I don't let them sit still. I make sure those thoughts keep going because I got things I want to do. And if you're focused and you have goals and you actually have those goals tied into your priorities and your priorities tied into your dreams and where you want to be in life and where you want to go in reality as a function of your life, then I think you're a lot less able to be distracted, at least so easily. And for a lot of people, we could look at it as they're making the choice, but I argue they're not making choices because there's not, like they're doing things, but those things are just being offered to them, and they don't have other options that would like deviate off that super highway of dumbing down information, right? So if they chose to like, wait a minute, instead of this next, new video game or this new Netflix series, what else could I be investing my time in that might pay me off down the road and be an asset as opposed to these things that are kind of trivial and their liabilities? And there's a lot of people these days getting their time sucked up by video games, virtual reality, and online streaming media that is not helping them learn how to do the next step on their way to the goal to meet their priorities and realize their life dreams. Right?
Exactly. Well, and the other thing is people don't realize how much they're whipped around, just like, Pavlov's dog. By every day there seems to be a new bell ringing. Here's what you're going to pay attention to today. Here's what you're going to fight about today. Here's what you're going to hate about today. And it's just a waste of time. But people don't realize that. It's kind of funny because the other day somebody had said to me, geez, I don't even remember who. Well, as you know, I told you before the show, I just listed my house for sale. And my realtor asked for my cell phone number. And I said, I don't have a cell phone. Well, what do I do if, we want to show the house? This is you leave a message and just leave it on my machine. And it still stymies people that I refuse to carry a cell phone. But it's more important for me to be alone in the quiet of my thoughts or singing along with my tunes when I'm driving down the highway than to be interrupted by the world.
You can put your cell phone on mute or silent.
Yeah, but then you got the tracking device too, so that doesn't make me too happy since I don't want to be targeted like some of my ex-co-hosts. So if they're gonna try to kill me, I'm gonna
take the battery out, and put it in a foil bag.
Well, you used to be able to do that. A long time ago, I had a couple of 9/11 experts come to my house. We were all going to talk about 9/11 and the work they were all doing, prior to doing some shows. And this was a long time ago. This was about 15 years ago. But they were all not only super paranoid, but also super smart, because in those days you could take the battery out of your phone. And they had all taken the batteries out of their phones, and they had all disconnected whatever tracking they had on their vehicles. That's how paranoid they were. And yet, while we were sitting in my backyard, some kind of light ray was shot between two of us sitting on a chair. Now, we all saw it, so we moved inside. But today, the way they figured out the phones, even when it's off, it's on. And that's not like I have, what I'm talking about or whatever, although I'm sure I'd be arrested for sedition. But to me, it's just a distraction. Even my home phone is a distraction. Life is to live, okay? And everybody seems chained to so much of this that they're missing out on living.
Yeah, and I think that's an intentional part of the technocratic culture that they're bringing about. And this has been a plan of theirs for a long time. I made a production in 2010 called What You've Been Missing, and in there was a Microsoft commercial where everybody was looking at their new smartphones and tripping all over each other and getting hit by cars and basically dying because they can't break the attention of the smartphone. And I said in 2010, I'm like, this is not just an ad that's clever. This is them projecting the future. This is how attached people will be to these devices. This is what they're looking to do, right? So that's going on. So what do we do about it? Do we all get rid of our cell phones, or do we start to just say, look, the cell phone is a portal for attention, and maybe we're going to put our attention over here on something that's structured that benefits us and stop giving our attention away as a liability. And that's all people really have to do. They're already, like, everyone has the same amount of time in a week. There's 168 hours. Right. So let's say 10% of your time you're doing entertainment that leads to nothing tangible in your life. It just sucks your time, whether it's video gaming or streaming media that's kind of just nonsense and not in line with where you want to be. And if where you want to be is where you are, that's cool. And have all the entertainment you want. But most people, if you ask them, they're using entertainment to numb the fact that they're not where they want to be in life and doing the things they want to do and traveling with the friends and having the family events or whatever. So let's work on that. So the way you do it is you take 10% of your time and you reappropriate it, right? The rest of your time you do whatever you want. But if you take 10% of your time and reappropriate it for something that's going to help you directly reach your goals, that's going to positively affect the other 90% of your time. And when your work's not going right or your relationship's not going right or any of these things are just off, that's not just that situation. It bleeds all over your schedule for the week, right? Just like if you don't like your job, you're spending 40 hours a week at least at this job you don't like. So how's your home time? Probably a little stressful, not too happy, probably a lot of entertainment. And then how's your sleep? Not going as well as it could be. So just how you misappropriate small part, like a third of your day, affects the other 2/3 of your day, right? So there's a lot of these cases, and people just get into a recurring loop where it's just going on and on, and it's like Groundhog Day. The way you break out of that, because that cycle is not going to end itself, they're self-perpetuating it from the status quo. Like the establishment wants people to not be thinking for themselves. They want them to be dependent. They want them to be easily guided by what they see on TV. Which brings it back to another point. Once upon a time, I didn't watch a lot of news. And then I was like, I need to know everything. So I was watching all the news channels. And I was like, that's a waste of time. I need to read more books. But then I was like, I don't feel like I'm keeping up with politics. I need to check back into that. So there's been an ebb and flow of my attention on mainstream media for a variety of purposes. Like at the beginning, 20 years ago, I was like, I need to watch it so I know what's going on in the world. And things go on in the world that don't match up with what's on TV. Then I'm like, wait a minute, I need to find out how that media works.
Right.
And then it's like, oh, they're up to no good, so let me keep track of them real quick. But what I've noticed is the past, since November probably, so almost 6 months at this point, I have not watched any mainstream media, TV, news clips, politics, any of that stuff. Not even on YouTube, not even in Colbert Report or some sort of clip show. I just haven't. And guess what? My goals are progressing. My life is on a track where I'm happy with where it is and where it's going and how fast it's moving. So it just seemed like a bunch of dead weight and baggage that was taking up a bunch of my time and attention. And more importantly, then I would try to talk to other people about that stuff. And instead of like actually asking them how they are and what their problems are and how it might help and these sort of things that you do in friendships and relationships, right, we're talking about a bunch of stuff, or even sometimes people are arguing about these topics. Like when I get together with friends, sometimes instead of actually talking about each other and what they can do like for themselves and locally, they're worried about aspects of the world that don't infringe on them, like don't have anything to do with like their daily anything. And that even if they were to come to some decision on this, nothing happens. So I had to ask them because, there's people on Facebook battles and I'm like, what are you guys getting out of this? Like, let's say you win. What happens then? Let's say he wins the argument. What happens then? Like nothing. Right. It's a waste of time. So the sooner I can get people to identify like where their time vacuums are, the things that just suck their time and energy and attention out of their lives, and we can just cut off that leak, and then they start to have like, oh wait, I actually have presence and focus and now feel like I can get something done. I might need less entertainment or less booze. There's a lot of people I've encountered over the last 6 months. It's like they don't have their beer time anymore, right? Time when they were sitting around watching a game, having a 6-pack, that sort of thing. Right. Because they found a better way to invest their time, and they realized how much time they were like spending and just blowing. Like it's the same thing with money. Like time is like money, only it's more valuable. So if I can help you like shave down 10% of your expenses on your like finances, that's one thing. But if I can help you shave like 10% down on like bullshit you're doing with your time that's sucking your time, your energy out of you, that would otherwise allow you to be fulfilled and like vibrant and like have vitality, that's quite a contrast. So until people have that contrast, that comparison, that choice, I would argue they're just on the train tracks. And though the scenery is passing by, it's not having anything to do with their choice. It's just that they're hooked on to a train that's going someplace, and every place that you are on that track is usually not where you would want to be in life.
Right.
Most people feel like they're stuck on it.
So I guess the question people should ask themselves, whatever it is they're doing, viewing, whatever, is this adding any happiness to my life? Because I think a lot of people, especially in America, where they say we're one of the most unhappy nations in the world now, really have forgotten, how to be happy. Or that they're entitled to be happy because we get caught up in so much other bullcrap. So, maybe whatever it is, instead of saying, is this putting money in my pocket, people need to say, is this adding to my happiness?
Well, and let's take money out of the picture and just say that you're living a rural lifestyle. So happiness, satisfaction, meaning, all those things are kind of tied together. Success, if you're going to go off property, we can talk about success, but the other things really apply if you're just living a solitary lifestyle in a rural setting. The satisfaction comes from when it's windy and cold and rainy or snowy outside, that you have a roof over your head, you got a fire burning, you got some food in your belly, and it's all good. You can have a good night's sleep, right? The meaning and substance, that just comes from interacting in ways. You might be building a stone wall across part of your property, or putting up a fence, or patching a roof, right? That all has meaning and substance and value because you directly benefit from it. Now, if you take away that self-reliant, self-competent, and self-confident attitude, and you put people in the let's go to school for 15,000 hours, and then you can spin the wheel and see if you can get a job that you may or may not like, and it may or may not pay you long term, and you may or may not just get fired at any time, and then try to find happiness on this road where there's very little certainty, a whole bunch of things you have to figure out that you're not told about, but you already paid into a system that should have told you about these things, but you didn't get an education, you got schooled, right? So people are in the midst of like finding themselves like a couple years into a job after school, and they're like, why am I even working this job? I have no interest in this area. Oh, because these are the people that called me back after I put a bunch of resumes in stacks at the job fair, right? That's how people are letting their futures be determined. So the idea is to take a step back and learn that, first off, if you don't learn how to write your own script in life, how to write your own ticket in life, meaning giving yourself permission to do that which you want to do, pursue the interests you want to pursue, right? If you're not doing that, somebody else is going to do it for you. That's how it goes. People were writing a script in life. People find themselves halfway through their life and have a midlife crisis because they're like, oh, I never really made these choices. Now I'm becoming conscious of a bigger game. And then they feel like they lament that. My point would be it's never too late to start.
Exactly.
Because you invested part of your life and you've prostituted your time. You've spent it in frivolous ways, playing Fortnite or, watching House of Cards on Netflix. Those are my two cliche euphemisms for how people use, it's junk time. It's just like eating junk food. There's no nutritional value in it. It might feel good at the time, but it's not building your body. And it's probably taking away from your advantage that you could have in getting ahead. Right. So most people are always struggling and they can't. Well, here's the things that prevent people from making progress. If there's a way, if you have an issue or a problem, a challenge, if there's a result you'd like to attain that you don't have, or there's something you'd like to get rid of that you currently have, those are the two ways people spend money. If you don't have that situation, then you're in a state of happiness or success or whatever, because you're not wanting. You might be doing stuff, but overall you have your needs met, and all these other things are nice to haves, right? There's a lot of people that just struggle in trying to meet their needs, and they think they're too busy to learn their way out. I know what all their objections are, why they can make an excuse to stay in that situation. Right? They don't have time. Well, I understand that you don't know how to manage your time to get yourself out of that situation, right? So that's why you think you don't have time. But guess what? Everyone has the same number of hours in a week. So let's look at how you're investing your time, or are you spending it? Oh, look, you're spending a bunch of time. So once you talk people through the line of questioning that they should be having with themselves to get past that position, then it's you've had this race car and it's revving its engine and spinning its wheels, but I'm you got to take it off the jacks. You got to have the wheels make contact with the pavement, and then you're going to have to steer, right? Because you're going to be going really fast. So people are able to make breakthroughs pretty rapidly. And these breakthroughs have been waiting to happen, and for some of them, decades and decades.
Exactly.
And they've been, so there's all these ways that I've seen people break through these aspects, but first they have to get to the point where they're like, okay, the system I've been through really hasn't worked out to my advantage, and I'm ready to make a change. And then they decide to evaluate the market and search on YouTube and read books, and then they try to implement change that way. And for some people that works.
Right. Well,
I can do that stuff. You can do that stuff.
Right. Well, years ago, God, I was in my 30s. My oldest sister, I guess she had gotten sick and tired of me constantly telling her that I wish I would have done something with my art, because when I was a kid, I wanted to grow up and be an artist, and I was always drawing and whatnot. But then, of course, life came over me, and, I got stuck in the corporate world, sort of like you did. And one day, when I guess my sister was at a breaking point with me saying, I wish I had time to do something with my art, she said something very profound, and believe me, she's only given me 2 sentences of good advice in all her years of being on earth. She said to me, if you really want to do that, you'll find the time to do it. And that hit me like a ton of bricks, Richard. So I looked around at the local schools, the local high schools, to see what it is they were offering, any kind of classes or whatever, and I took an adult education watercolor class. A year later, I was making my living doing watercolors. So.
And how often do you paint now?
I got over it. I just don't. I succeeded. I made a good living. I had a one-woman show in Manhattan a year later. I got great reviews, and then I said, okay, what's next? That's just the way I am. If I succeed at something, I want to do something else. I just feel I've transformed my art into the other things that I do. I see my radio show as a form of art. and I still enjoy it. So when I don't enjoy it anymore, I won't do it. But you were talking earlier about mainstream media, and I've had recently several people tell me they no longer will watch the news. All they need to do is listen to my news shows, and they know everything that's going on. And not just in America, because you know how I like to cover the whole planet.
Well, I think it's a unique opportunity for people, because if you take a break from the mainstream media, or get people to understand there's a concept of, hey, take a break from mainstream media and then see what happens. And if you need news, Meria does a show once a week. You can pick it up there. You don't need it more often than that. You certainly don't need it every day. Like, if there's something going on, you'll hear bells and whistles going off around you, and they'll be like, go this way.
Right.
Otherwise, a lot of that stuff doesn't matter.
No, well, I do them twice a week.
The stuff that the bells and whistles for don't matter.
Right. Well, I do them twice a week, and as people know, Richard, I cover the stuff that's never on mainstream media. The stuff that's really important, besides, Trump sucking the oxygen out of the room every day and the false narrative. I'm covering what no one is hearing, because everybody's paying attention to the noise. Whether it's Fukushima, whether it's, offshore drilling, whether it's, Brunei and their horrible civil rights laws, or, whether it's Texas wanting to make women face the death penalty for abortion. These are not things that they're hearing in mainstream media. And for me, like I said earlier, I like to know everything that's going on, because it all fits together. If you don't see all of it, you're not seeing any of it.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, people need to have a broader spectrum of intake on their information than just their favorite news channel.
Right.
I mean, I don't have a favorite news channel. I don't favor any channel for news. When I'm looking for news, it doesn't have a channel attached to it, And that's one of the advantages of using the internet. That's something called hyperlearning, being able to use the internet and direct your focus at learning something specific, so that you can have a specific outcome come from that. So if you want to understand the news, then you need to collect from many, many different sources on any given different story, and then be able to contrast and compare in an analytical reading fashion that would allow you to sort out the signal from the noise, such that you can sift away the noise. That's the contradictions, that's the fluff, that's the things that have claims that do not have ties to reality, and just focus on the signal, which is very simple, because there's very little signal in most of that media transmission.
Absolutely.
Right? The signal would be the facts that are reflected in objective reality and are measurable and verifiable. And like I said, their journalism is no longer the 5 W's and how, which would provide you knowledge on a topic. Rather, they're just sending you word salads to hypnotize people into ideas about things that are misrepresentative from reality. So I think your observation skills are better. You should look at reality yourself, and not through the lens of any type of mainstream media outlet, because it's always a carnival sideshow kind of mirror.
Absolutely. I mean, and now listen, I've been using the same trusted sources for the whole 19 years of my show. And for me, it's like a game. So I see it as an art form, being able to look at all of this, process it in my computer brain, and then spit it out for the reality it really is. Anyway, Rich, we need to take a short break. Stay with us. Rich and I will be right back.
We change the world one person at a time. Meria leads by example and with integrity. Come join the family at the Meria Heller Show. You are not alone, and there are many people just like you searching for answers to life's questions. There are several options to subscribing to the private, membership-only education that Meria provides. Pick a subscription of your choice. The $9.95 option is open to anyone and make it affordable for all. Real freedom of thought and speech still exists. It's at meria.net. That's MERIA.net.
Hi, this is Meria Heller. If you're enjoying this show, please consider listening to the rest of it, along with hundreds of other hours of education, by a small subscription on my site. Get over to meria.net, MERIA.net. You are the only thing that supports this show. There's no corporate control, and there's plenty of education on site. So please consider either a subscription or a donation to keep the work going. There are too many alternative voices out there that are being silenced because of lack of support. So if you don't want MSM to be the only mind-controlling news out there, please consider supporting the people that support you and help us all save something for the future for our children. Thank you so much.